The Montana winter of 1876 was particularly unforgiving. Silas Mercer trudged through knee-deep snow, his breath forming thick clouds in the frigid air. At 43, the lines on his weathered face told stories of hardship and solitude. A decade had passed since he'd left Pennsylvania following the war, seeking isolation in the untamed wilderness, where memories couldn't find him so easily. His cabin stood 3 miles from the nearest neighbor and 15 from the small settlement of Clearwater. Just how he preferred it. The townsfolk knew little about the taciturn man, who appeared only when necessary for supplies, offering nothing beyond curt nods and exact payment. Silas adjusted the weight of the deer carcass slung across his shoulders. The hunt had taken him farther than anticipated, and darkness was approaching. The temperature would drop another 15 degrees after sunset. He quickened his pace. A column of smoke caught his attention, rising in the distance where no smoke should be. Instinct told him to ignore it. Other people's business wasn't his concern. Yet something pulled him toward the dark plume. As he approached, the scene revealed itself. The charred remains of a small homestead, still smoldering in places. The attack had been recent, perhaps only hours earlier. Silas scanned the perimeter with practiced caution, rifle at the ready. No movement, no survivors. The silence was heavy, broken only by the occasional crack of burning timber. The family, he counted 3 bodies, hadn't stood a chance. The pattern of destruction suggested bandits, not natives. Arrows remained in quivers. Valuable horses were missing. Silas had seen such carnage before, during the war and in the lawless territories. He was turning to leave when he heard it, so faint he almost dismissed it as the wind. A whimper, then another. Following the sound, he moved toward what remained of the root cellar. The entrance had collapsed, but a small opening remained. Silas dropped to his knees, peering into the darkness. "Anyone there?" His voice, unused to speaking, came out as a rasp. Silence followed, then another whimper. Silas began clearing debris, his gloved hands working methodically until the opening widened enough for him to enter. The space below was thick with dust and ash. As his eyes adjusted to the darkness, he saw her. A child, no more than 4 or 5, huddled in the corner, partially buried in ashes. Her face was streaked with soot and tears, eyes wide with terror. She clutched a singed rag doll to her chest. "I ain't gonna hurt you," Silas said, the gentlest his gruff voice could manage. "You hurt." The girl didn't respond, didn't even blink, just stared with those enormous eyes, traumatized beyond words. Silas noticed a body nearby, a woman who had likely hidden the child before succumbing to her wounds. The mother's final act of protection. "We need to go," he said. "It ain't safe here." When the child made no move, Silas reached for her slowly. She flinched, but didn't resist as he lifted her from the ashes. She weighed almost nothing in his arms, a fragile bundle of bones and terror. Outside, the daylight was fading fast. The temperature was already dropping. Silas wrapped the child in his wool coat and retrieved his pack and the deer carcass. The nearest settlement was too far in this weather with a child in tow. His cabin was their only option. As he walked, Silas felt the girl trembling against him, not just from cold, but from shock and fear. Her silence was unnerving. Children should cry, should scream, not stare with vacant eyes that had seen too much. "My place ain't much," he told her, feeling a strange need to fill the silence. "But it's warm. Got food." She remained mute, clutching her doll with white-knuckled intensity. Night had fallen completely by the time the cabin came into view. Silas had never been so relieved to see the humble structure. Inside, he worked quickly to stoke the dying embers in the fireplace, adding kindling until flames leapt to life. He set the child down on his only chair, noting how she seemed to shrink into herself, making her already tiny frame even smaller. Her dress was torn and singed, inadequate protection against the Montana winter. Silas found an old shirt, clean enough, and offered it to her. "For sleeping," he explained. When she made no move to take it, he simply placed it beside her and turned away to give her privacy, busying himself with preparing food. What would he do with her? Clearwater had no orphanage. The nearest proper town was 2 days' ride. And there was the matter of the bandits, who might still be in the area. Tomorrow, he would figure it out. Tonight, they needed warmth and rest. Silas glanced at the silent child, now staring into the fire. Without a word, he had become responsible for a life beyond his own for the first time in over a decade. The first week passed in near-complete silence. The girl spoke not a single word, though Silas occasionally caught her whispering to her rag doll when she thought he wasn't listening. He didn't press her. Words had never come easily to him either. He'd fashioned a small bed for her in the corner, piling furs and blankets until it resembled a nest. She slept fitfully, often waking with silent screams, her small body rigid with terror. On those nights, Silas would stoke the fire and sit nearby, not touching her, but offering his presence until she drifted back to sleep. During the day, she followed him like a shadow as he performed his daily tasks. When he skinned rabbits, she watched with solemn attention. When he chopped wood, she collected the smaller pieces in her tiny arms. All without prompting, all without a word. "Should give you a name," Silas said on the 8th day, as they ate a breakfast of cornmeal mush, sweetened with the last of his honey. "Can't keep calling you girl in my head." She looked up, spoon halfway to her mouth, but offered no suggestion. "Your folks ever tell you your name?" He tried. Her eyes dropped to her bowl. No response. Silas sighed. "All right then. How about Emma?" "Knew an Emma once. Good woman. Strong." The child gave no indication she approved or disapproved, but when Silas called her Emma that evening, she turned her head. It was enough. On the 10th day, Silas knew he could delay no longer. Their supplies were dwindling, and the child needed proper clothes. A trip to Clearwater was necessary. "We're going to town," he told Emma as he wrapped her in his smallest shirt and an improvised cloak made from a blanket. "Stay close. Don't wander." The journey took most of the morning. Emma walked until her legs gave out, at which point Silas carried her on his shoulders. He felt her small hands gripping his hair, her body tense against his head. Clearwater was barely more than a wide spot in the road, a general store, a saloon, a blacksmith, and a handful of houses. Still, it represented more humanity than either of them had seen in days, and Silas felt Emma's grip tighten as they approached. The bell above the general store door announced their arrival. Harold Weaver, the proprietor, looked up from his ledger, surprise evident on his face. "Mercer," he nodded. "Twice in 1 month. Must be some kind of record." Silas grunted in response, lifting Emma down from his shoulders. Harold's eyes widened. "And who might this be?" "Emma," Silas replied, offering nothing more. Harold waited for an explanation that didn't come. "I see," he said finally. "What can I get for you today?" "Girl needs clothes. Shoes. Some peppermint candy if you got it." As Harold gathered the items, other customers entered the store. Whispers followed. Silas Mercer with a child? The hermit taking care of someone other than himself? Emma pressed against Silas's leg, her face partially hidden in the folds of his coat. He placed a protective hand on her shoulder, surprised by how natural the gesture felt. "There's talk of bandits in the area," Harold said as he wrapped their purchases in brown paper. "Wilkins' family was found dead last week. Terrible business." Silas stiffened. "Sheriff doing anything about it?" "What sheriff?" "Nearest lawman's in Helena." By the time word reached him and he rode out, the trail was cold. Harold lowered his voice. "They say there was a child. Never found." Silas felt Emma trembling against him. "That's so," he said flatly. Harold leaned closer. "Some folks are organizing. Going after them. Good luck to them." Silas placed coins on the counter, gathered their packages, and lifted Emma back to his shoulders. Outside, they encountered Mrs. Peterson, the preacher's wife. Her eyes immediately fixed on Emma. "Oh my," she exclaimed. "Who is this lovely child?" Before Silas could respond, she continued, "The Ladies' Aid Society is always looking after orphans. We could find her a proper home, with a mother and father. A family." Emma's hands tightened painfully in Silas's hair. He felt her small body begin to shake. "She has a home," he said curtly, and walked away, leaving Mrs. Peterson open-mouthed on the boardwalk. The return journey was quieter than the trip into town. As they crested the final hill before his cabin, Silas felt Emma relax slightly on his shoulders. That evening, dressed in her new clothes, a simple dress, woolen stockings, and sturdy boots, Emma sat closer to Silas than she ever had before. When he offered her a piece of peppermint, her small fingers brushed against his calloused palm as she took it. After she fell asleep, Silas remained by the fire, contemplating the strange turn his solitary life had taken. He'd gone into the wilderness to escape connections, responsibilities, the pain that came with caring for others. Yet here he was, responsible for this silent, traumatized child who somehow seemed to understand him better than any adult ever had. "Emma," he whispered to the quiet cabin, testing the name, accepting its permanence in his life. February brought relentless snowstorms that sealed them inside the cabin for days. Silas used the time to teach Emma simple tasks: how to mend clothing, preserve meat, identify useful herbs in his limited winter stores. She proved a quick study, her small hands soon mimicking his movements with surprising precision. Their routine developed a comfortable rhythm. Mornings began with Silas stoking the fire, while Emma set their places at the table. Afternoons were for chores and lessons. Silas discovered an old primer in his trunk and began teaching her letters, surprised by his own patience. Evenings were spent by the fire, Silas carving wooden animals, while Emma watched, occasionally reaching out to touch the finished pieces with wonder. Still, she didn't speak. Not when she cut her finger on a knife, and tears silently streamed down her face. Not when she woke from nightmares, body shaking with silent sobs. Not even when Silas, in a rare moment of clumsiness, dropped an entire pot of stew and cursed colorfully enough to make a cavalry sergeant blush. "You can talk when you're ready," he told her one evening. "Or not at all. Makes no difference to me." But it did make a difference, though he couldn't articulate why. Her silence felt like a locked door between them. He could see her through the keyhole, but couldn't reach her fully. One morning in late February, a break in the weather allowed Silas to check his trapline. "Back before dark," he promised Emma, who stood in the doorway watching him leave, her rag doll clutched to her chest. The day was clear but bitterly cold. Silas worked efficiently, collecting 3 rabbits and resetting the traps. The sun was still high when he turned toward home, satisfied with the day's yield. He smelled the smoke before he saw it, not the comforting scent of his own chimney, but the acrid smell of burning wood and something else, something that sent him running through the snow, rabbits forgotten. As he cleared the trees, he saw them, 3 riders circling his cabin, torches in hand. One had already set fire to his woodpile. Another was trying to force the door. Through the window, Silas caught a glimpse of Emma's terrified face. The bandits. They'd found her. Rage and fear propelled him forward. He raised his rifle, firing a warning shot that split the winter air. "Get away from my cabin," he roared. The men turned, momentarily startled. Then the largest one laughed. "Look what we found, boys. The hermit's got himself a little prize." "That's the Wilkins girl," another said. "No witnesses, remember? That was the deal." Silas leveled his rifle at the speaker. "You're not touching her." 3 against 1, old man," the leader sneered. "And once we're done with you, we'll take care of the little." The shot cut off his words. Silas had never intended to miss. The man toppled from his horse, dead before he hit the ground. The second bandit drew his pistol, but Silas was already moving, diving behind a woodpile as bullets splintered the logs around him. He chambered another round, took careful aim, and fired again. The second man fell. The third bandit, younger than the others, panicked. He wheeled his horse around, spurring it toward the trees. Silas let him go. The threat was neutralized for now, but the young one would likely return with others. Silas rushed to the cabin. The door was partially broken, hanging from one hinge. Inside, the furniture was overturned, but the space was empty. "Emma," he called, panic rising in his throat. "Emma." A small sound came from beneath his bed, a whimper so faint he almost missed it. Dropping to his knees, Silas peered into the darkness. Emma was pressed against the wall, eyes wide with terror. "It's all right," he said, reaching for her. "They're gone. You're safe." She didn't move. "Emma, please." His voice cracked. "We need to go. It ain't safe here anymore." Still, she remained frozen, beyond the reach of his outstretched hand. Silas felt desperation rising. "I know you're scared. I am too. But I promise I won't let anyone hurt you. Not ever." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, so quietly he thought he might have imagined it. Promise. The word hung in the air between them, fragile and momentous. Silas felt his chest tighten. "I promise," he replied, his voice rough with emotion. Emma crawled forward into his arms. As he lifted her, she wrapped her arms around his neck and pressed her face against his shoulder. "They came back," she whispered, her voice rusty from disuse. "I know, but they won't hurt you again. They hurt Mama and Papa and baby James." Silas held her tighter. "I'm sorry, little one. You came back too," she said, pulling away slightly to look at his face. "Always will," he promised. Outside, the afternoon was waning. They needed to move quickly, gather what they could, and put distance between themselves and the cabin before dark. There would be time for grief later, time for words and healing and whatever came next. For now, they had each other. And for the first time in years, Silas found that was enough. They left within the hour, taking only what they could carry. Silas packed methodically, food, ammunition, tools, Emma's few clothes, and the wooden animals he'd carved for her. The rag doll never left Emma's arms. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice still barely above a whisper. "West," Silas replied. "Got a friend in Oregon Territory. Owes me a favor." The truth was more complicated. Samuel Wheeler had been Silas's sergeant during the war. They'd saved each other's lives more times than either could count. Their last meeting had ended with Samuel pressing a map into Silas's hands. "Land's good there," he'd said. "Enough for both of us, if you ever get tired of running." Silas had kept the map, but never planned to use it. Until now. They traveled hard that first day, Silas carrying Emma when her small legs tired. By nightfall, they'd put 15 miles between themselves and the cabin. Silas found a sheltered hollow beneath a rocky outcropping and built a small, nearly smokeless fire. As Emma huddled close to the flames, he explained their situation in simple terms. "The bad men might come looking. We'll need to be careful. No talking when other folks are around." He hesitated. "And it might be best if they think I'm your pa." Emma considered this, her face solemn in the firelight. "What should I call you?" The question caught him off guard. In the months she'd been with him, he'd never told her his name, and she'd never asked. "Silas," he said. "But Pa works too, when others can hear." She nodded, accepting this with the same quiet gravity she approached everything. "I remember my real pa," she said after a moment. "He had yellow hair. Not like yours." "No," Silas agreed, running a hand through his dark, graying hair. "Not like mine. He used to sing to me." Her voice wavered. "I don't remember the words anymore." Silas felt a pang of inadequacy. He couldn't sing, couldn't offer the comfort her real father had provided, but he could keep her safe, and that would have to be enough. "Try to sleep," he said gently. "Long way to go tomorrow." In the days that followed, they settled into a new routine, traveling by day, camping in hidden places by night. Emma grew stronger, able to walk longer distances without tiring, and she began to talk more, hesitantly at first, then with increasing confidence. She told him about her family in fragments. Her father had been a carpenter. Her mother made the best apple dumplings. Baby James had just learned to crawl when the bandits came. Each revelation was delivered matter-of-factly, without tears, as if she were reciting facts from a primer. Silas listened, offering no platitudes. He understood grief too well to diminish hers with empty words. They encountered few travelers on the trail west. A fur trapper who shared his fire and stories, but asked no questions. A family in a wagon heading east, disillusioned with Oregon's promise. Silas kept these interactions brief, his hand never far from his rifle. On the 14th day, they reached the Missouri River. The spring thaw had begun, making the crossing treacherous. They spent 2 days searching for a safe ford, finally finding a spot where the river narrowed between rocky banks. "Hold tight to me," Silas instructed, lifting Emma onto his shoulders. "If I fall, grab my coat and don't let go." The water was numbingly cold, the current stronger than it appeared. Midway across, Silas felt his footing slip. He struggled to regain balance, aware of Emma's rigid form above him, her small hands clenched in his hair. For a moment, panic threatened to overwhelm him, not fear for himself, but terror at the thought of failing her. Then his boot found purchase on a submerged rock, and he pushed forward with renewed determination. They reached the far bank soaked and shivering but alive. Silas built a fire larger than he would normally risk, stripping Emma of her wet clothes and wrapping her in his relatively dry coat while her things dried. That night, huddled beside the fire, Emma broke her silence. "I was scared," she admitted. "Me too," Silas confessed. She looked up, surprised. "But you're not scared of anything." Silas almost smiled. "Everyone's scared of something, little one." "What are you scared of?" The question hung between them. Silas poked at the fire, watching sparks rise into the darkening sky. "Failing," he said finally. "Not being enough." Emma considered this, her small face serious. Then she scooted closer, leaning against his side. "You won't fail," she said with absolute certainty. "You promised." Something tightened in Silas's chest, an ache both painful and sweet. This child's faith in him was unearned, yet it had become his compass, guiding him toward a future he'd never imagined for himself. "I did at that," he agreed softly, "and I mean to keep it." Above them, stars emerged one by one in the vast wilderness sky. Ahead lay unknown territory, danger, and hardship. But for the first time in years, Silas looked forward rather than back. Spring advanced as they traveled, the landscape transforming around them. Valleys grew greener, wildflowers appeared in meadows, and the days lengthened. They crossed into Idaho territory in early April, following the winding Snake River westward. Emma changed too. Color returned to her cheeks. She collected flowers and interesting stones, creating small treasures from the journey. Her voice grew stronger, her questions more frequent. Sometimes, Silas even heard her humming softly to her doll, tuneless melodies that nonetheless lightened his heart. They were 2 days from the Oregon border when Silas spotted the riders. 3 men, following their trail with purpose. He'd been careful, but not careful enough. "Emma," he said quietly, "remember the hiding game we practiced?" Her smile vanished immediately. She nodded, eyes wide but composed. "Go up that ridge. Find a spot like I showed you. Don't come out until you hear the owl call." She hesitated only briefly, clutching her doll tighter. "3 hoots means it's you. 4 means danger." "That's right. Now go." He watched her scramble up the rocky slope, small and quick as a squirrel, until she disappeared among the boulders. Then he turned to face what was coming. The riders approached cautiously, rifles ready. Silas recognized the youngest bandit from the cabin attack. The others were new, harder looking, professional manhunters by their appearance. "That's him," the young one confirmed as they drew within speaking distance. "The hermit who killed Jed and Miller." The oldest rider, a grizzled man with a face like tanned leather, spat tobacco juice. "Where's the girl?" "What girl?" Silas kept his voice neutral, his stance relaxed though his mind calculated distances, angles, chances. "Don't play dumb, mister. The Wilkins girl. Only witness to the Watson Ranch job." The man's eyes narrowed. "Got a nice bounty on her head from interested parties who don't like loose ends." "Hired killers," Silas stated flatly. "Working for who?" The man shrugged. "Money's the same color, no matter who's paying. Now, we can do this easy or hard. Girl's small. Probably hiding nearby. You call her out. We finish our business. You walk away. Or," he patted his rifle meaningfully. "She's just a child," Silas said. "Should have thought of that before you made her your problem." The man sighed with mock regret. "Last chance. Where is she?" Silas knew he was outmatched. 3 guns against 1. But Emma was hidden well, and if he could buy her enough time, his decision was made in the space of a heartbeat. "Run!" he shouted toward the ridge. At the same moment, he drew and fired in one fluid motion, hitting the leader square in the chest. Chaos erupted. The young bandit panicked, firing wildly as Silas dove behind a boulder. The third man, calmer, took aim shots that chipped stone inches from Silas's head. Silas returned fire methodically, conserving ammunition. The young bandit fell next, clutching his throat. But as Silas turned to the third man, pain exploded in his left shoulder. The impact knocked him backward, his rifle slipping from suddenly numb fingers. The last manhunter approached slowly, pistol aimed at Silas's heart. "Where's the girl?" he demanded again. Blood soaked Silas's shirt, but he managed a grim smile. "Gone. Too far to catch now." The man's face darkened with rage. "Then you died for nothing." He cocked the hammer. The shot that rang out wasn't from the manhunter's pistol. The man staggered, confusion crossing his face, before he collapsed face first into the dirt. Behind him stood Samuel Wheeler, rifle still raised. "Your timing's improved," Silas managed through gritted teeth. Samuel lowered his weapon, shaking his head. "Still cutting it too damn close, Mercer." As Samuel knelt to examine the wound, a small voice called from the ridge. "3 hoots means it's safe." Both men looked up to see Emma peering from behind a boulder, her doll clutched protectively to her chest. "That's right," Silas called, his voice strained but steady. 3 hoots. Come on down, little one. It's over." She scrambled down the slope, stopping short at the sight of Samuel. Her eyes darted between the stranger and Silas, uncertainty written across her face. "It's all right," Silas assured her. "This is the friend I told you about, Samuel Wheeler." Samuel removed his hat, his weathered face softening. "Pleased to meet you, miss." Emma approached cautiously, her focus shifting to Silas's bloody shoulder. "You're hurt." "It's not so bad," he lied. "Samuel here will patch me up good as new." As Samuel helped him to his feet, Silas fought against a wave of dizziness. "How'd you find us?" he asked. "Got your message about heading west. Figured you'd take the Snake River route." Samuel glanced at Emma. "Didn't expect you'd have company." "Long story," Silas murmured, feeling strength ebbing from his limbs. "Tell me later," Samuel said, supporting him. "My place is just over that ridge. Been watching for you these past 3 days." As they made their way slowly toward the waiting horses, Emma slipped her small hand into Silas's good one. "You didn't fail," she whispered, so only he could hear. Despite the pain, Silas felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The danger wasn't entirely past. There would be healing to do, explanations to give, a new life to build. But in that moment, with Emma's hand in his, and the Oregon border within reach, Silas Mercer found something he'd thought lost forever in the ashes of war. Hope.